Welcome to Scam of the Week, and we are going to Mars. Going to Mars today, because if Peter Dutton gets up as Prime Minister this year, his deputy is unlikely to be Sussan Ley. She's now deputy of the Liberal Party, because that accolade usually goes to the National Party, the party for big mining. And Dutton, in his recent reshuffle of the Shadow Ministry, effectively demoted Sussan by blocking foreign affairs, a role she had aspired to. This was disappointing. It went to Julian Leeser because he's a Zionist, and Sussan has the disadvantage of being a former co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Palestine group. Couldn't be having her in that role. It's disappointing, this decision, because Sussan could bring great joy and entertainment to the lives of many. She got this week off to a rollicking good start with her historic comments about Australia Day. Sussan compared the arrival of the First Fleet with Elon Musk's efforts to build a colony on Mars. You can see the synergy there.
All those years ago, those ships did not arrive, as some would have you believe, as invaders. They did not come to destroy or to pillage. In what could be compared to Elon Musk's SpaceX's efforts to build a new colony on Mars, men in boats arrived on the edge of the known world to embark on that new experiment. A new experiment and a new society. And just like astronauts arriving on Mars, those first settlers will be confronted with a different and strange world, full of danger, adventure, and potential.
But the usual naysayers emerged from the woodwork to decry Sussan's comments. Albo was forced into a very difficult situation. Cornered he was, behind in the polls, and having to speculate about the Indigenous people of Mars. To quote him, "Well, there aren't people that we know of on Mars," said Albo, with not very much conviction. How can he say that? He hasn't been to Mars. How can he say this with any certainty? How can he disprove the existence of people on Mars? No, he can't. Could be like Hamas people hanging around in tunnels beneath the core of Mars. It's no wonder that the coalition is ahead in the polls, with the government ministers simply unable to address important policy issues like this when cornered by intrepid reporters at these doorstop presses. And it was refreshing this week because the media really shook up its program. Usually, at these little doorstop presses, they play the Peter Dutton says game. Peter Dutton says nuclear is 44% cheaper than renewable energy. How do you respond, Mr. Albanese? But no, it's Sussan says as well. That's affirmative action for you in the coalition. And talking about media diversity, did you see that bloke with the MAGA hat on in St Kilda? You couldn't have missed it. It was all over the airwaves, on radio and television. Really soaked up the coverage this week. Don't worry about the cost of living crisis, foreign affairs, AUKUS, or any of that stuff. There was a guy who was chucked out of a restaurant in St Kilda, in Melbourne, for wearing a MAGA cap. Outrageous it was. We should all wear MAGA caps in solidarity. A new Me Too MAGA movement that'll get us on the project at Channel 10 for sure. They love the MAGA man. Perhaps even Q&A if the story was covered by the Murdoch press. Australia is always a year or two behind America when it comes to political trends like MAGA. But it's happening here, isn't it? We are not yet appointing Fox News TV hosts to key government positions like the Donald is in his reality TV show cabinet lineup. Not yet. The Donald's pick for Transport Secretary, TV co-host Sean Duffy, said this week in the wake of the tragic mid-air aviation crash in Washington, he said, "It's not standard to have aircraft collide. I want to be clear on that." Thank you, Sean. Couldn't be clearer than that. Efficiency will prevail, however, because Sean and the Donald, they've got a program of cost cutting, and the Doge. One of Sean and Donald's pledges is to make aviation more efficient by cutting red tape in safety. That will work. Now, to Nvidia, the stock of the year until earlier this week. Nvidia, AI. It's gone crazy on that NASDAQ. Now, we've looked on quizzically for quite a while now at the stratospheric rise of Nvidia and the AI stocks on Wall Street, suspecting that it might be another dot-com boom. Is it a scam, Nvidia? The vanguard stock of the AI boom? Well, it had the biggest one-day fall in the history of capitalism, bleeding $600 billion in one day, almost $1 trillion Aussie dollars, just one stock, rattling the ASX to its core as tech stocks and the whole market got hammered in its wake. The dreaded Chinese had come out, you see, with this thing called DeepSeek, a rival to Nvidia and the rest. But unlike the $1 trillion market capitalization of Nvidia, the Chinese claim to have just spent $6 million developing the software for DeepSeek, not trillions. Software which they claim, and this helped the crash in Nvidia. It bounced later in the week, but they claim, the Chinese, that it's many times more powerful than the Wall Street stuff is when it comes to AI. And suddenly the markets realized, it was like a light bulb went on, that maybe the share market might have overcooked this stuff, might have overvalued it. The real scam, of course, is Nvidia and others had created the belief on Wall Street that America owned the internet, that these guys owned the internet. They could just scrape it for all it was worth, all the data they wanted. It's effectively the biggest plagiarism in history. It's a rort, and somehow it belonged to them, they claim. Come on. When they created the internet and back in the 1990s, didn't everybody know that it belonged to America? So it was that the cries went up, we're going to have to smash China with tariffs. That will work. Donald's tariffs, that'll get inflation going. But what about the terror plot? The caravan bomb in Dural on the outskirts of Sydney, which had been parked, this caravan, for the whole Christmas holidays, unlike every other caravan, which was probably used for holidays, on the side of the road with explosives, with an anti-Semitic note revealing that the target was a synagogue. Good thing, a very good thing, that they apprehended a couple of the suspects. There's 3 they've got now in custody. They don't appear to be Muslims, unfortunately. That sort of damages the narrative a bit. But somebody from overseas said the police is pulling the strings. Who could it be? Hamas? Hezbollah? The United People's Front of Judea? Whoever it was not good for social cohesion down under. The anti-Semitism crisis goes on. Meanwhile, in a grandiose bid for Scam of the Week, with a majestic flourish, the Nationals leader David Littleproud sprung out of the blocks with his aspirational comments that the coalition would start building nuclear power plants from day one in office.
We'll start building the first nuclear power plant the very first day after a coalition government's elected. We'll get on with the job. The time for talk's over. We have to get on with this.
So that's as soon as May, if they get into office, if they win the election. Day one. Peter Dutton endeavoured to eclipse David's day one feat later in the week by reminding everybody yet again that solar panels did not work at night time, when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. Our policy, he said...
Our policy is 44% cheaper than Labor's renewables only policy, pretending that the solar panels can work over night time and that batteries last more than 4 hours. That game is up. Renewables are good in our system, but we can't pretend that they operate 24/7.
Peter's comments mirrored the comments by Shadow Treasurer of the Cayman Islands, Angus Taylor, about Jim Chalmers destroying the economy. 2, they're all at it, these people, destroying our economy. Yes, in the wake of the disastrous news that inflation was still coming down, terrible news for the coalition. This week when the CPI came out from the ABS, Angus revealed not only that Jim was destroying the economy, but that also he was intentionally destroying the economy. Said Angus, that was Jim's plan, to destroy the economy.
Well, if his plan was to cause more damage to Australian standard of living than we've ever seen before, than any of our peer countries, then he should fess up to that. And that has been his plan. And his plan is that we won't restore our standard of living until 2030. This is his plan. This is a guy who doesn't understand economics.
But don't despair. Nuclear will fix everything. They've really got the goods, this coalition, somehow figuring out that the most expensive form of energy, nuclear, well, okay, Might not be the most expensive. I mean, you could hire teams of consultants from PwC to rub two sticks together for $1,000 an hour, but nuclear is somehow cheaper, according to 44% cheaper than that sun and wind, that free stuff, according to these fellas, cheaper than things which are free. It's just magic. What other word can you describe it with? But the cost of nuclear is one thing, being 44% cheaper than free wind and sun. It's the sheer operational efficiency of this coalition mob. Hallmark of the previous 9 years of coalition government building car parks so efficiently and things like that. It's nothing short of mind-boggling. David Littleproud and the lads are going to get nuclear building on day one in office. That is efficiency for you. They'll start building nuclear on day one. And why not? You can find the 7 sites, rally the community approvals at breakfast time, find the water and the right technology for your nuclear plans, over a cuppa at morning tea, go out for your free lunch, come back early from lunch, of course, none of these long lunches, tee up the safety and regulatory infrastructure across the nation in the mid-afternoon. That will just take a jiffy, and shove the legislation through both houses of Parliament in the evening. Get the money and then start pouring the concrete. Job done. Why not? Day one, David. And for this, we're extremely tempted to award Scam of the Week to Day One David, but David Littleproud. But how can you trump Sussan? How can you trump Sussan Ley? I mean, if you look at those early paintings of the lads at Botany Bay in their red British Army get-up, sinking the flagpole into the soil of Botany Bay, there are no Aboriginals in sight. Parallels to Mars, not a one Indigenous person. Who knew? Same deal with Mars. Don't you worry. They'll come out of their little hidey holes in their little space suits. Got to wear space suits on Mars because the climate's a bit frosty, 100 degrees below zero, but that's not too much of a problem compared to Uranus, which is 320 degrees below, or Pluto, which is almost 400 degrees below zero on an average day. Mars is balmy compared to those outer planets. So come on down, Sussan. You have won Scam of the Week. Triumphed in the Oscars of Australian politics for services to political entertainment. Thank you. Please like, share and comment in the section below.